Okay, so here we are, our fifth session on volume 5. So volume 5 is this one, In Praise of Great Compassion. And this was, maybe I should say, one of my favorite volumes to write. All of them have been very wonderful to write, but this one it's a whole volume about bodhicitta. Okay. The volume 6 talks about the bodhisattva practices, but this one talks about the 4 immeasurables and bodhicitta, and it brings it in from also the perspective of the Pali tradition and the Chinese tradition. So it's a very expansive and well-rounded explanation of what bodhicitta is about. And some people are very, very surprised to find out that there is a bodhisattva path delineated in the Pali tradition. Yeah, they're very surprised. What? I was told that all those people are selfish. And now you're telling me that they have a bodhisattva path? Oh, impossible. Well, yes, I'm saying that. And it's possible. But before we get into it, let's just spend a couple of minutes coming back to our breath and generating our motivation. And then we'll get into the topic. Just let your breathing pattern be relaxed. And the mind that follows the breath in and out, let it be relaxed also. Don't squeeze yourself to pay attention or to concentrate. And distractions occur. So if one comes, just say hello, goodbye, and come back to your breath. Let's do that. Then let's generate our motivation. And recall that we've been born everywhere and as every kind of sentient being throughout infinite space and throughout beginningless time. So in samsara, there is nothing that we haven't experienced, from the worst torment to the greatest pleasure. And yet none of that has brought the peace, the satisfaction, the fulfillment that we really seek in our lives. So this life, let's try something different. And instead of being preoccupied with my happiness now, and I want what I want when I want it, let's turn our attention to the plight of all sentient beings, ourselves included, and appreciate the almost miraculous condition that we have a precious human life. I say almost miraculous because it takes so many, so much virtuous karma to create the cause for this kind of rebirth. And yet somehow we managed to do that in previous lifetimes. So having the present opportunity that we have and an awareness of the deeply unsatisfactory nature of cyclic existence. Let's aspire not only to free ourselves from it, but to really open our hearts and see that we and others are exactly the same. And if we seek freedom from samsara, other living beings will as well. And so to be able to help them go in that direction and to help them while they're in samsara, let's aspire for full Buddhahood, where we can do that in the most effective and wise and compassionate and skillful way. And so let that be our motivation for sharing the Dharma today. Then open your eyes and come out of your meditation. Okay. So in praise of great compassion is not twisted up like this cord. So this cord is like our mind, and we are trying to untwist it. Okay, so to give you a little bit of an idea about this, so you can see where it fits in with the series. The first volume was an introductory. The first volume and this first half of the second volume were introductory. Then we got into, talking about mind and cause and effect and the two truths and the four truths in a very general way. And then we got into precious human life, death, and then into karma, talking about karma. Okay, that's the second volume. Third volume, samsara, nirvana, and what makes going from samsara to nirvana possible, Buddha nature. And then the fourth volume was following in the footsteps of the Buddha. So following the three higher trainings, those are the basic elements of the true path. And of course, as Mahayana practitioners, we add bodhichitta. So that's volume 5, talking about bodhichitta. Okay, so we start out in this volume talking about the four immeasurables. Okay, love, compassion, joy, and equanimity. And the beginning, we talk a lot about it in the Pali tradition. Yeah, they have a specific way of presenting it. It's presented in the Mahayana tradition. I mean, you just chanted it 5 minutes ago. But the way it's talked about is just a little bit different, because in the Pali tradition, they use the four immeasurables as an object with which to develop serenity or shamatha. And in our tradition, the four immeasurables are also an object of shamatha, but we also incorporate them into our tantric sadhanas and into our general practice, just to be able to increase those four attitudes consistently and as much as possible. Okay. So there's some interesting things in that first chapter. Maybe I'll just do the overview and then come back to it. Second chapter is about bodhicitta, the causes of bodhicitta, benefits of bodhicitta, the bodhisattvas as role models. And I know for myself, just hearing about bodhisattvas' deeds, watching my teachers' actions and how they deal with different situations really inspires me too, to see in technicolor the benefits of bodhicitta when somebody has that in their mind, and how they relate in the world and how they benefit others. Okay, chapter 3 is about cultivating bodhicitta using the 7 cause and effect instructions. And chapter 8 is developing bodhicitta from Shantideva's tradition, equalizing and exchanging self with others, which actually is the tradition I personally prefer. And I love Shantideva's teachings, because his style is just like, and it's not like, oh, you can have a little bit of attachment, just don't let it get too bad. And you can, just develop your bodhicitta a little bit, slowly. No, Shantideva is like, you're completely self-centered, admit it, acknowledge it, and see how it messes up your life. And I know for me, that approach works really well, okay? I need that like clobber 'em on the head approach to kind of wake up, okay? So that's chapter 4. Chapter 5 is becoming a bodhisattva. And this one I also want to come back to, because it talks about the self-centered attitude and the self-grasping ignorance. And what's the relationship between the two? Okay. And who can generate bodhicitta? Can our bodhicitta degenerate? And then what's called the signs of irreversibility when you are solid on the Mahayana path going towards awakening. Chapter 6, this one is one of my favorite ones. So you may be familiar with Chandrakirti's homage to great compassion that, in which he starts out his supplement to Nagarjuna's treatise on the middle. And it's, one verse that is like so full of meaning. And then, of course, Jason Kappa unpacks it, and it talks about 3 kinds of compassion and how they function and how they combine wisdom with that kind of compassion. So that's one of my favorite practices. Chapter 7 is aspiring and engaging bodhicitta. Okay. So this is according to the Sanskrit, according to the Tibetan tradition. Okay. I didn't say Sanskrit because the Chinese Buddhism is basically Sanskrit tradition too, but their way of setting forth the bodhisattva vow is a bit different. They rely on one of the same texts that the Tibetans do, but then there's also some differences in the other texts that they rely on. Okay, so, and then chapter 8 is a whole chapter about love, compassion, and bodhicitta in Chinese Buddhism. Yeah, and I remember many years ago being with my teacher, and he was just commenting about, Chinese Buddhism, it's Mahayana, but they don't have any ways to really develop bodhicitta the same way we do. Okay. Now, it's true, the Chinese tradition doesn't have the 7 cause and effect instructions. They don't have equalizing, exchanging self with others, but they definitely have ways to develop bodhicitta. And they do talk a lot about bodhicitta. So it's not just, yes, we want to become Buddhas and be nice people to everybody. It's not that. It's really much deeper. And so there's the tradition of the 4 great vows and also the 5 great vows in Chinese Buddhism. And I also remember when I was going through this chapter with one of His Holiness's translators. And when he read that section about the 4 great vows, he was like so shocked. He said, really? These vows are wonderful, and they're found in Chinese Buddhism. I said, yeah. And the Zen people, all these people, they recite them every day. And he was so shocked. He didn't know about that. Okay. So part of my purpose in this book, the way, His Holiness, I put it together, isn't just to teach these methods, but it's to show the people of the different Buddhist traditions what is in the other Buddhist traditions. Yeah, because they often, they don't know. All they know is what they heard, different rumors and conspiracy theories passed down over the generations. Like, all the Theravadas are so selfish. And that's ridiculous. They aren't. Okay. Or the Chinese only do blank-minded meditation. No, that's not true either. Or, from the Theravada tradition, well, the Tibetans and Chinese, they're practicing apocryphal sutras, they're not real Buddhists. Or the Chinese look at the Tibetans and say, those people just practice magic. And they're having sex and drinking, practicing Tantra all the time. So it's like, this is what, unfortunately, people think about other traditions. So part of this was to really expose people to that. So chapter 9 is about bodhicitta and bodhisattvas in the Pali tradition. Okay, so here's one of the main misconceptions, at least in our tradition, is that the Pali tradition doesn't talk about bodhicitta and it doesn't talk about bodhisattvas, and that's not correct. Yeah, there's a bodhisattva path that is set out in the Pali tradition. And also, I remember one of my very dear Dharma friends, he's a Western teacher, and one time, during one of His Holiness's big teachings, they asked people, some other Western teachers, to give talks in the evening. And so Sharon Salzberg gave a talk about the four immeasurables in the Pali tradition. And, she's a practitioner of Theravada. And my friend, the Tibetan teacher, Western Tibetan teacher, afterwards said, I had no idea they talked about love and compassion, joy and equanimity. What she said in that talk was remarkable. And so again, this kind of lack of knowledge that we have that is really rather sad. Okay, so part of that, a whole chapter on Chinese, the love, compassion, bodhichitta in Chinese Buddhism, and then similarly how they are in the Pali tradition. And then chapter 10 is about mind training, the thought training teachings. And I don't know about you, but I find the thought training teachings are what really save me. When I am upset, when my mind is confused, I go to the thought training teachings because they're so clear about how to transform difficult situations into the path to awakening. So how to change our way of viewing different things so that we don't just get locked into our own preconceptions, our own afflictions, and think that all our projections are reality when they're actually garbage. Yeah? Okay, so that's volume 5. Now, let me go back. I had a slip of paper right here with some things that I thought of sharing with you. Okay. So the first one is how they, in the Pali tradition, they teach about love, compassion, joy, and equanimity. And then they also talk about the near and far enemies of those 4. And I find this quite interesting. Okay, so I'll read from the book. Oops, let me put it up here. Okay. So each of the 4 immeasurables has a near enemy and a far enemy. So the near enemy is an affliction that is similar in some way to that virtuous immeasurable. The far enemy is an affliction that is the opposite of the emotion that we are trying to cultivate. Okay? So this is very helpful to learn because we very easily confuse one of the immeasurables with its near enemy. Yeah, because the near enemy shares some quality with that particular immeasurable quality. And we get them confused sometimes in our practice. Okay, so here it goes. The near enemy of love is attachment, because both love and attachment see the good qualities in the other person. Yeah. So this question comes up a lot in teachings. What's the difference between love and attachment? And how do you know when you love somebody? And how do you know when it's just plain old attachment? Okay. Well, one clue is if it sounds anything like the songs on the radio or on the TV, then it's attachment. Okay. But we often confuse those songs with actual love. Okay. So love and attachment both see the good qualities in the other person. However, attachment clings to others with unrealistic expectation. It wants something from them. Okay, when we're attached, we have a whole list of expectations, how that person should be, especially towards us. Okay, and we want their love, their appreciation, their fidelity. There's a lot of strings attached when there's attachment. And thus, the affection we feel is polluted with possessiveness and neediness. Okay, so that there you start to see the difference between attachment and actually loving someone. Malice is the far enemy of love, because malice, wishing somebody ill, is the opposite of love, because love, by definition, is the wish that others have happiness in its causes. So we must ensure that our love is free of both of those dangers, okay, of attachment and malice. Compassion's near enemy is personal distress or grief based on worldly life. This grief is the sadness and distress felt when we or those we care about cannot get what we want. It may be sorrow over past frustrations or present disappointments. So the grief is similar to compassion in that both have an element of sorrow due to others' misery. Okay, so here it is showing one way that we misunderstand compassion, because we often feel that if we're truly compassionate, then our own heart is painful. And we have the image, if I'm really compassionate, I'm going to be hanging on the cross. I've got to sacrifice myself and all my happiness and be miserable. And that's the only way to know that I'm truly compassionate towards somebody. So that is an idea very much in Western minds regarding compassion. But it doesn't correspond with what the Buddha taught about compassion. Okay? So when we watch somebody who we care about, or even anybody we don't know, experience pain, when we have personal distress, going, I can't bear to see that. You know, like my dog is in such pain, I've got to take him to the vet and put him down. You know, that kind of distress of I can't stand to witness somebody else's suffering. That is personal distress, okay? Because compassion is directed towards the other person. Personal distress, who's the object of that? Me. I feel distressed. Instead of compassion is that person's in pain, and I wish them to be free of that pain and the causes of that pain. So when we have personal distress, we are not very effective in benefiting people. Okay? Because we're so involved, we're so tumultuous in our own heart that we can't really turn our attention to somebody else. I'll give you an example. A friend of mine who was also a long-term Dharma student, he had something with his lungs, and he had lung replacement surgery. They put in somebody else's lungs. And who was constantly having difficulty with this. This was a number of years ago. I hope the procedure is improved now. But he often got sick and had a hard time breathing. So one time he was in the hospital, you know, his lungs malfunctioning. They had to put him on a ventilator, and he was put under because apparently being on the ventilator is quite painful, at least in his case. So he was doped up. And the doctors were saying to his wife and another friend, his best friend was there too, that, you know, he's not going to make it. So his wife gave permission, and they stopped putting him under for a minute. And they said, are you ready to go, or do you want to stay and be on the vent? And he said, I'm ready to go. So this hospital was at Stanford, and they were really very considerate. They took all of us into a private room because he was in ICU. They took us into a private room. So there was me and his wife and his best friend. And they pulled the vent out. There was a nurse giving some injections so that he wasn't gasping and so on. But during the whole process, when he was dying, I was right next to him, giving him instructions about how to see what was, you're dying. This is how to look at it. Get in touch with your compassionate heart, generate bodhichitta. Don't hang on to anything here. I was giving these kind of instructions. His wife and his best friend were there, and if they loved, in the Western way we say it, they loved him very much, but they were crying. There was nothing they could do to benefit because they were so overwhelmed by their own grief in losing him. Okay, so that's what I mean. That when I say that personal distress interferes with us actually benefiting, whereas I didn't love him in that way, so I could be present with him when he was dying and give him some kind of instruction. Okay, so it became very clear to me at that moment, the difference between the two, and how easy it is for us to get caught up in our own personal distress. And then somebody else needs our help, but we can't give it. Yeah. Okay. So personal distress is the near enemy of compassion. And compassion's far enemies are cruelty and violence. So that's clear. They're the opposite of compassion, wanting to cruelly inflict harm on others. Okay, then the near enemy of empathic joy is joy based on worldly life. Okay, so empathic joy, the immeasurable of joy, is when we say, may others be free of nirvana and, never experience, they be free of, how do you have it worded in your, I can't remember, in your four immeasurables? How is it worded? May they
find the joy that has never known suffering.
Okay. Yeah. May they find the joy that has never known suffering, meaning may they find nirvana, okay, and never be separated from that. Okay. So that's empathic joy. And here the worldly joy, is the near enemy. Okay. So what is worldly joy? Okay, it's delight at receiving sense pleasures in the past or the future. Here our mind becomes giddy with excitement. We become too involved and attached to somebody else's happiness. Okay? So it's kind of like, this is very easy to happen with your children. Yeah. When your child does well, it's like, I'm so happy. And you're just, they aced their spelling test, or, they graduated as valedictorian, or, it's joy over some kind of worldly, pleasure. Yeah. So we're not saying don't rejoice at people's worldly pleasure, but just recognize that that's not what the Buddha meant when he talked about the immeasurable joy. Okay? Yeah, because what Buddha meant was just you see somebody else's virtue and their good qualities, and you rejoice in them having it. Yeah. So rejoicing in others' virtue, rejoicing in their good qualities. Yeah. But how do we often react when other people are virtuous and have good qualities, and when they have opportunities, we don't? How do we often act? We're jealous, aren't we? How come they can do that and I can't? How come they have that ability? Oh, and in Dharma centers, oh my goodness, the amount of jealousy sometimes that students have for other students, especially, the inner circle. How I'm sure you're familiar. Most of the Dharma centers I've been to have been like this. There's an inner circle of students who are the ones that are close to the teacher. Yeah. And then there's other people on the outside, and they want to be in the inner circle and be close to the teacher, but they can't because these other people are there and make some kind of barrier. But they want to be, and there's all this jealousy comes up. One of my teachers used to invite people into his room very early in the morning to do morning puja. And it's like, oh, I want to be invited, but he didn't invite me. And he asked somebody else to make him a cup of tea, and I never get to serve him. So then when he asked me to make him a cup of tea, I go in the kitchen and get out of here, everybody else. He asked me for tea. I'm making it, and it's this kind of jealousy. Yeah. Do you know what I'm talking about? No. Okay. Good. I'm glad you don't have any experience of this. So, yeah. Okay. So, that's one of so jealousy is one of the far enemies of empathic joy. And also boredom is, because when we're bored, we can't muster the energy to rejoice at somebody else's happiness and somebody else's qualities. Okay? We're like so blah that nothing moves us. Okay, so these two interfere with our experiencing empathic joy at others' success and happiness. Jealousy resents the other person's successes and happiness, and boredom just doesn't care about them. Okay? So, I never thought I was a very jealous person. Yeah, in romantic relationships, I wasn't jealous. But once I got into the Dharma, and the monastics, we sit in order of our ordination. Yeah. And I'd look up the line, the people who were ordained before me, and they had so many more good qualities than I did. And it was like, gee, I wish I could be like them, but I'm not. And then I'd even look at the ones who were junior to me, and some of them had more good qualities than I did. And on both sides, there were people who were in the inner circle who got to hang out around my teacher all the time. And I didn't. I was sent out to teach. I was sent out to lead meditations. Oh, I had to work. But they got to hang around the teacher. You could tell my lack of Dharma understanding at that period in my life by what I just said. Okay? Total out to lunch, wrong attitude. Okay. But, and then my teacher starts talking, when you do the 7 limbs. So whenever we would do some puja, and we came to the 4th limb, the 4th limb is about rejoicing. Yeah. The 7 limb prayer, 4th limb is rejoicing. He would stop and make us practice rejoicing and say, okay, now think of other people, rejoice at their virtue, rejoice at their opportunities. And I'm going, I don't want to. I'm so jealous. But he kept at it. And so I had to try and change my mind. And if you try, you can make some progress with it. Yeah. But what really eased my mind about this particular jealousy was one day, Lama Yeshe was commenting on students' relationships with teachers. And he said, sometimes the teacher keeps the students who are the biggest disasters close to them because those students need more help. And the ones who are doing okay, they don't need to be so close to the teacher. I thought, maybe that's why I can't be in the inner circle. I don't think that was really the reason. But anyway, it made me feel better. Okay, then equanimity. Equanimity's near enemy is the equanimity of unknowing based on worldly life. So this is the indifference and apathy that people often experience. Indifference and apathy are similar to equanimity in that none of them notices the faults or the good qualities of others. Okay? So it's just like, I don't care. And many times, people new in the Dharma mistake when we talk about non-attachment. They think that means indifference and apathy. Non-attachment is actually a virtuous mental factor that is the opposite of attachment. So it's a mental factor that can see these good qualities and so on, but doesn't get attached to them. A mental factor, kind of like renunciation, not chasing after worldly pleasure. But often people hear non-attachment and they think, it's just becoming indifferent. Or, for example, in Shantideva, I think it's chapter 5 of Bodhicharyavatara, when he talks about, when people insult you, when they do all these horrible things to you, you remain like a log. Yeah, you remember that? Remain like a piece of wood, remain like a log. And then you get the feeling of, okay, somebody is, beating somebody else up, and I just have equanimity. So I'm like a log, somebody's getting beaten up. Who cares? Yeah. And we mistake that for equanimity. That is not equanimity. Okay. But it's a close enemy of equanimity because it shares that attribute of not noticing either the faults or good qualities of the other person. And then equanimity's far enemies are anger and attachment, which push us to hold some beings close and other beings distant. Okay. So I find that kind of presentation very helpful for when I meditate on the 4 immeasurables, to really make sure that I'm meditating on the 4 immeasurables and not some kind of affliction that I confuse with them. Okay. Then another thing. Have you heard about sharp faculties and dull faculty disciples? No? Okay, here it comes then. So there's two types of Mahayana disciples. So some have sharp faculties, whereas others have more modest faculties. Here, faculties refers in particular to wisdom, but more broadly to the 5 faculties that are part of the 37 harmonies with awakening. So those 5 faculties are faith, effort, mindfulness, concentration, and wisdom. So the disciples with sharp faculties first seek the correct view of emptiness. So they're practicing the Dharma. They're getting a whole broad view of the whole Dharma path to awakening. Yeah. And they're doing meditation on bodhicitta, but they're really emphasizing the wisdom aspect of the path. Okay, these are the sharp faculty ones. So through using reasoning, they understand that ignorance apprehends phenomena to exist inherently, whereas phenomena exist dependently. Seeing that the wisdom that realizes emptiness, can eradicate this ignorance that is the root of samsara, and thus can cease samsara completely. The sharp faculty disciples are convinced that attaining awakening is possible through gaining insight into emptiness. So first, they really think deeply. Remember last week, we did that passage where Nagarjuna was proving the existence of the 3 jewels, and he started out with dependent arising, and because things are dependent, therefore they're empty, and the realization of emptiness is the true path, which brings about true cessation. And so that is the Dharma refuge. Remember, we talked about that last week. Okay, so here these disciples emphasize gaining some insight into emptiness. Yeah, so they're not going to gain they're not yet at the point where they can gain the union of serenity and insight on emptiness, because that would mean that they were already on the bodhisattva path, which they aren't. But they gain some kind of really deep, correct assumption that yes, things are empty, and that wisdom realizing emptiness can eradicate all the afflictions, and thus liberation and awakening are possible. Okay, so that's where the sharp faculty puts their energy. Then, after that, they develop compassion and generate bodhicitta. So in this way, sharp faculty disciples aspire for full awakening, enter the bodhisattva path, overcome the self-grasping ignorance, practice the 6 perfections, and attain awakening. So they start out really focusing on emptiness, and then after that, generating bodhicitta. The disciples of the modest faculties admire bodhicitta due to the strong faith they have in their teachers who speak about bodhicitta. And so they're, and also due to their aspiration to attain awakening derives from their faith in the 3 jewels. So contrary to the sharp faculty disciples that emphasize wisdom, the modest faculties disciples have faith that they have faith in the Dharma because they have faith in their teacher. Okay. And like that. They're more faith-based disciples. So they cultivate heartfelt compassion for others' dukkha and build up altruism on that basis. These disciples have not yet gained the wisdom to deeply appreciate selflessness and its essential role in attaining awakening. So they first generate uncontrived bodhicitta, enter the bodhisattva path, and then they make effort to gain an inferential understanding of emptiness. Okay, so they do it in the opposite way. Okay. So bodhisattvas with sharp faculties are not content to believe that liberation and full awakening are possible because their spiritual mentors stated that, or because that is what is written in the sutras. Okay, they want to know, what is the root of all afflictions? Can afflictions be removed? What realization will eliminate them? Okay, so with strong compassion and altruism, these disciples examine whether sentient beings' dukkha can be totally eliminated and whether the path to liberation exists. So that leads them to understand emptiness, at least on an intellectual level. Okay. And then based on that understanding, they generate conviction that it's possible to remove the afflictions and eradicate dukkha and the causes of dukkha. And they generate the knowledge that liberation is possible. Okay. Whereas the modest faculty bodhisattvas first cultivate compassion and bodhicitta and then turn their minds to understand emptiness. Okay. So then, which one are we? Do we emphasize wisdom in our practice? Do we? How do we relate to the teachings? Do we accept things because our teacher said them, or do we really investigate what that teaching means and exactly how to practice it? Okay, so it's an interesting question to ask ourselves. Am I sharp faculty or modest faculty? His Holiness Dalai Lama often mentions this kind of thing. And he says, you should want to be sharp faculty. But some of us maybe, it's just so much easier to have faith and go along with what our teachers say than to really use our intelligence in question. Okay. So the auto commentary to Shantarakshita's Ornament of the Middle Way has a few verses about this, which I'll read. First, searching to know reality. Then ascertain well the ultimate truth. And then generate compassion for the world obscured by bad views. Emboldened to undertake migrators' welfare and skilled in the vast mind of awakening, they practice the subduer's discipline, the bodhisattva's deeds, adorned with wisdom and compassion. So that's the sharp faculty ones. Then there's another verse. Followers of pure faith, the modest faculty disciples, generate the mind of perfect awakening, bodhicitta, and then assume the discipline of the subduer, practicing the bodhisattva's conduct, and strive, and then in that context, they strive for the knowledge of reality. Okay, so two different kind of ways according to their disposition and tendencies. Interesting, huh? Makes us kind of ask, where am I? Yeah. Okay. Then and another question that often comes up is what's the difference between the self-centered attitude, which is the obstacle to generating love and compassion and bodhichitta, and the self-grasping ignorance, which is the obstacle to realizing emptiness. Because as bodhisattva practitioners, or Mahayana practitioners, bodhisattva wannabes, we want to eradicate both the self-centered attitude and the self-grasping ignorance. Have you studied The Wheel of Sharp Weapons? You know, this beautiful text by Dharmakirti. You should study it. It's Dharmarakshita, not Dharmakirti. Dharmarakshita. And it's included, which is my book? Good Karma. Yeah, my book, there's two titles I confuse. Good Karma. Okay. So I included that poem that Dharmarakshita wrote, and then, wrote and explained it in Good Karma. And it talks about, two big obscurations that are, that hinder our path. So those are the two, the self-centered attitude and the self-grasping ignorance. Okay. So, and they're two different things. Yeah. So the self-centered ignorance and self-grasping are not the same, although both hinder our progress on the bodhisattva path and our obstacles to Buddhahood. Self-centeredness holds our own happiness as more important than that of others, and our own enlightenment as much more important than the enlightenment of others. That's self-centeredness. Self-grasping apprehends the I, other persons, and all phenomena as inherently existent. Okay. So the self-centered attitude is it's not an afflictive obscuration, and it's not a cognitive obscuration. Okay, afflictive obscurations prevent us from attaining liberation. Cognitive obscurations prevent us from attaining Buddhahood. Self-centered attitude isn't either of these. Okay, it's not a pollutant or a defilement, and it's not the root of cyclic existence. It is often called an inferior obscuration that those following the bodhisattva path must prevent because it inhibits their attainment of the non-abiding nirvana of the Buddha. Okay? So here's the difference between an arhat and a Buddha. An arhat has, this is according to the Mahayana path, okay? The arhats have attained liberation, okay? But, and they've eliminated the afflictive obscurations in order to do that, but they still have subtle obscurations on their mind that interferes with them becoming Buddhas and realizing the two truths at the same time. They still have the appearance of inherent existence to their mind. Okay, so this is for the arhats. The Buddhas can see conventional and ultimate truth simultaneously. They don't have this appearance of inherent existence from their own side. Okay, so the nirvana of a Buddha is called non-abiding nirvana because it doesn't abide in samsara like worldly beings, and it doesn't abide in a personal liberation like the arhats have. Okay, so it's non-abiding nirvana for the Buddhas. So the self-centeredness is called, it's an obscuration to attaining Buddhism, to attaining Buddhahood and the non-abiding nirvana of the Buddha. Although the self-centered attitude is called an obscuration, it is not an actual obscuration because it is not the object of abandonment of a path, as are the afflictive and cognitive obscurations. However, it is a hindrance for bodhisattvas to abandon. So if this is confusing, think of it this way. The self-centered attitude that holds our own liberation as more important than the liberation of others, for people following the path to arhatship, that attitude is a good attitude because they want to attain their own liberation. So the self-centeredness is not an impediment for somebody following the Shravaka or the solitary realizer path. However, for somebody following the bodhisattva path who wants to be of the greatest benefit to all sentient beings, and thus they want to remove all obscurations for their mind forever, the self-centeredness for those people is an obscuration to achieving their spiritual goal. Okay, makes some sense to you? Okay, so self-grasping ignorance is the root of samsara. It grasps persons and other phenomena to exist inherently. It is an afflictive obscuration that has been eliminated by arhats and eighth ground bodhisattvas. Okay. Self-centeredness and self-grasping do not have a causal relationship. One does not cause the other. Okay. They are also not the same nature, okay, which means that if one exists in a person's mind, the other one would have to exist if they were one nature. So it's not one nature. Okay. Arhats have abandoned self-grasping, but they have a subtle self-centeredness. Bodhisattvas below the eighth ground, who freshly entered the Mahayana path, that is, they were not arhats who later came back and entered the Mahayana, those bodhisattvas have self-grasping, but they don't have coarse self-centeredness. Coarse self-centeredness is abandoned upon generating spontaneous bodhicitta and entering the bodhisattva path. Subtle self-centeredness and its latencies are overcome upon attaining the eighth bodhisattva ground, although some sharp faculty bodhisattvas eliminate them before that. So subtle self-centeredness does not manifest once sharp faculty bodhisattvas reach the path of preparation, and when middle faculty bodhisattvas attain the path of seeing. Okay, so there's a difference between these, and it's good to be aware of them so that we know, well, when am I combating the self-centered mind, and when am I combating the self-grasping mind? Okay, because they obscure our mind in two different ways. Okay. Then, let's see. Oops. Okay. Okay, so here's the part on the 4 vows from the Chinese tradition. Okay, so the Mahayana Buddhist traditions throughout East Asia recite the 4 great vows daily, making them the centerpiece of their Dharma practice. So although they recite these 4 daily, they also have the Bodhisattva precepts. Okay, The Chinese version of the Bodhisattva precepts, like I said before, it's a little bit different than the Tibetan version, okay? But it overlaps in many, many ways. The Japanese version of the Bodhisattva, their version of the Bodhisattva vow is much more different than the Chinese version of the Bodhisattva vow compared to the Bodhisattva precepts that we hold. Okay. And so we're here, the four great vows. Containing the condensed meaning of all the Bodhisattva precepts, the four great vows are found in sutras and commentaries, such as the Sixth Patriarch Platform Sutra, the Sutra on the Practice of Prajnaparamita, the Lotus Sutra, the Medallion Sutra on the Bodhisattva Path, and others. So that's the sutra source. So here they are. Countless are sentient beings. I vow to liberate them. Endless are defilements. I vow to eradicate them. Measureless are dharma doors. I vow to cultivate them. Supreme is the Buddha's way. I vow to attain it. Those are pretty strong vows to take, you know, but the more we can say them, the more we plant seeds in our own mind to actually transform our mind so that those four vows are heartfelt. Yeah. So we may start out with words, reciting them, but as we meditate on them, as we recite them repeatedly, then the understanding gets deeper and deeper in our own mind. Okay. So the last of those four vows, which is the supreme is the Buddha's way, I vow to attain it. Okay. So that refers to the generation of bodhichitta. Yeah. So the Buddha's way refers to Bodhi, the awakening of a Buddha, and bodhicitta is the vow to complete the path to full awakening. To fully actualize this aspiration for full awakening, the support of the first three vows is needed. So the first great vow is to liberate each and every one of the countless sentient beings because we feel that their dukkha, their suffering in samsara, is our own. Okay? So that includes, when we are vowing to liberate every sentient being, if the election yesterday disturbed your mind in any way, it includes all those people. Okay? If what's going on in terms of climate change or is not going on in terms of climate change disturbs your mind, it also includes those people. We're vowing to liberate them too. Okay? So it's expansive. Okay, so the first vow is about great compassion, and it leads to the second great vow, which is endless are defilements, I vow to eradicate them. Okay, so this is the determination to eradicate all the defilements of ourselves and also our other beings. And so this shows that great compassion is not sentimental pity, and it's not some kind of romantic idea of spirituality. Okay, it's not, oh, I'm such a good person, I want to liberate everybody. You know, Mary Poppins-like. It's not that. But that great vow spurs the generation of wisdom that will eliminate the defilements completely. And then that leads to the third great vow, which is measureless are Dharma doors. I vow to cultivate them. Okay. And so in the third great vow, to cultivate the countless approaches that remove these defilements, okay, which we saw according to the second vow, we need to remove. So just as there are numberless defilements, there are also measureless realizations and measureless skillful means to master, to overcome them. So although somebody could protest that these 4 vows are too vast and may be impossible to actualize, such concerns do not plague a genuine Mahayana practitioner. Instead, her mind is focused on the awakening of all sentient beings, and she is willing to do everything possible to bring it about, such as eradicate the endless defilements that pollute her own and others' mind streams, cultivate the diverse remedies the Buddha has taught for overcoming defilements, actualize all the awakened qualities, and attain the supreme awakening of a Buddha. So it's 4 simple statements, but just from that 2-paragraph explanation, wow, that sets forth a lot of work for us to do. But it's certainly worthwhile and beneficial work. Okay, so I just looked at the clock. There's time for a few questions. Do you have any? So please feel free to ask questions or bring up points of concern.
I guess it's sort of a comment that could be taken as a question. Can you hear me? I may have my volume on. Okay, good. Just earlier, the aspect of being able to actually flip-flop between those motivations that are related to understanding reality and the broadening of our heart. That they actually, it strikes me that it's hard to separate for some people as a 1-2 punch because they actually support each other.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So that you're actually doing both at the same time. If you're doing either one of them well, the other one seems to rise. It seems to me, because you have to have the heart to care, and that motivates you to figure out what's going on, and what's going on motivates you to engage in a way that's compassionate.
Yeah. Definitely for the practitioner who has that broad attitude and really seeks full enlightenment, then the bodhicitta side and the wisdom side really complement each other a lot. Mm-hmm. But for some practitioners, they may not, because they're more interested in liberation, for example, or other people are more interested just in love and compassion. So it depends very much on the person. But I agree with you that for people who have a solid understanding, they very much complement each other.
Or in some ways, it seems the good karma, because sometimes you don't know where your motivations and inclinations, it's like that synchronistic book falling off of the table, and it's the one you just wanted to read, and you wonder why.
Yeah.
So I was just throwing maybe there's a third category in those 2 categories.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't think when they break things into categories that we need to become really rigid about it.
Exactly. That was why I mentioned it. Yeah.
Yeah. Because in any of the categories, there's some give and take and leeway in it. Okay. Yeah. What we need to be careful of is making so much leeway that then everything pleases our ego, and we don't try and practice and really change our mind.
Yeah, losing the honesty aspect. Yeah.
Okay.
The truth. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you so much.
Other questions or comments? Anything?
I think Carla may have something.
I did. I was just curious because I think it's so interesting hearing the different traditions, you know. And I do want to get this book for that. And I was curious how you compiled it. Did you go to different types of monasteries? I think you said that in the beginning, maybe, but
yeah,
I don't.
Yeah. Well, for first of all, I had friends in these who were monastics in both these traditions, because for over 20 years, almost every year, although it didn't happen this year because of COVID, the Western monastics of all the Buddhist traditions will gather for 5 days to discuss issues and things that are of mutual interest. So I got to know other practitioners, and I mean, what do we talk about? We, all the things that interest monastics, and so you really get to know what other people's practice is about, and what their teachers are like, and these kinds of things, and develop real friendships. So that was part of those people I actively sought out. But more than that is I sought out the Asian practitioners, okay? Because I think it's really important to keep contact with our Asian practitioners, because they hold the lineage and people in the West don't. Yeah. And this whole thing of American Buddhism, and we're going to update it. It's kind of a colonialistic attitude for me. Okay. So I want to go to the Asians. So, one of the Western friends, Western monastics that I knew, he arranged for me to go to his monastery in Asia, where the teacher and most of the monks were Asians. And His Holiness also wrote me a letter that I could take with me. And so I spent 2 weeks there, and I was able to receive teachings from the teacher. I requested him for teachings, and then he taught almost every day. And I transcribed them, I asked questions, and so on. So that was one thing. Also, I had lived in Singapore in some previous years, and in Singapore, you find, Thai teachers, Sri Lankan teachers, many people. And I had become also friends there with, he was a Western monk, but he practiced in the Theravada tradition from Sri Lanka, and so we had become good friends. So I learned a lot about Theravada. We used to have debates, okay, together. It was very interesting. As far as the Chinese tradition, I had gone to Taiwan for my full ordination, because that doesn't exist in the Tibetan tradition. So I already had connection with a number of Chinese masters, and also with their disciples. And so some of them, I also used this letter from His Holiness. They arranged for me to meet other monastics, and also some of the Chinese Buddhists who in academia, so that I could ask them questions too. So that's how I did. Then I also read. Yeah, Bhikkhu Bodhi has a wonderful series of audio teachings about the Theravada path based on the Majjhima Nikaya. So I listened to all that. And I just found learning about other traditions, I was very, very helpful for my practice. I mean, I was already grounded in Tibetan Buddhism. Yeah. And so then when I was able to learn about other traditions, it really helped me kind of elaborate on certain areas of my own practice that helped me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Anything else? Okay, then let's dedicate.